Welcome to another explosive edition of the P&B World Cup show, where football conversation come alive and every big result gets the attention it deserves. I'm Abel Sunday. The FIFA World Cup has entered the thrilling round of 32, and Africa has every reason to be proud after an unprecedented 9 African nations booked their place in the knockout stage, rewriting history and proving the continent's growing strength on football's biggest stage. But the knockout rounds have reminded us that history alone guarantees nothing. One of Africa's teams, South Africa, has seen their remarkable journey come to an end after a narrow 1-0 defeat to Canada. Was it a case of missed priorities, tactical superiority from the Canadian, or simply the cruel reality of knockout football? We will break down this decisive moment from that encounter, assess what South Africa got right and where it all went wrong, while asking what this result means for the remaining African nations representatives still chasing World Cup glory. Joining me virtually from Port Harcourt is football analyst Merit J, who will help us unpack the tactics, the talking points, and the road ahead. Stay with us as you grab your teacup, because P&B Sports start now.
The countdown is over.
It's P&B World Cup show reaching you live from the nation's capital, and I'm being joined by Mary J, all the way from the other city they call it, Port Harcourt. Jay, good morning, and how is Port Harcourt this morning?
Well, Port Harcourt is fine. Good morning, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us as well. Out of your busy schedule, you had to squeeze out this small time for us, and I want to assure you that we will not take that for granted. Honestly, we will not take it for granted. Thank you for joining us again this morning. All right, let's dive into the conversation. We have 9 African countries. I would say 9. The reason I'm calling it 9, this is the first time we're having such amount of African teams going to the round of the knockout stage. Now we have 9. How can you explain, or what will you say about African nations being developed in the world of football? Jay, hang on a little, please. Can you be audible, please? We are struggling to hear you. Please be audible.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, so I would say that, of course, it's a huge milestone for Africa football to have 9 teams out of 10 making it to the knockout stage of the FIFA World Cup. Never happened before. Of course, it would never happen until now, because this is the first time we even having 10 African nations at the World Cup. You know that the World Cup was expanded from 2 teams to 4 teams, so it means that there are more teams from all the continents, especially for Africa, upgraded from about 5 teams now to 9 plus 1. Eventually was 10 teams at the World Cup. So it's a huge milestone, and these teams now represented themselves quite well, representing Africa as a whole quite well. Not the extent of players who are playing at the World Cup for the first time, making it through to the knockout stage. And except for what's it called?
Tunisia.
Tunisia was African nation who failed to make it out of the group. The rest of Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, Ghana, DR Congo, Egypt, they are known to this. It's quite a lengthy list, and it's good. It shows that African football is developing. And not just making it out of group stage. You also need to consider how these teams got to the knockout stage. So some of them played against teams that you consider as powerhouse. For instance, we're talking about Cape Verde. Cape Verde played against Spain. Cape Verde played against Uruguay. These are both former winners of FIFA World Cup. And Cape Verde being debutants. I mean, you play for the first time, getting good results. Although they were wrong, getting good results against it is something quite commendable. You know, Morocco played in the group that had Brazil. Brazil couldn't find a way to beat Morocco. Morocco held their own against Brazil. What was a very exciting football match at the World Cup. DR Congo played in the group that had Portugal. You know, Egypt played in the group with Belgium. So it wasn't like these teams had an easy passage to the World Cup knockout stage. We had to earn it, and it's quite exciting to see that African football and African nations can now hold their own against some of the best
Absolutely, it's quite exciting that we have 9 going through, but unfortunately, South Africa fall short of success yesterday. But if I want to ask you now, looking at the new format of the World Cup, do you see any of the African nation, come close to win the World Cup?
Well, I think when we talk about the format of the World Cup, I think it's pretty much still the same. It's just that it has been expanded from 38 teams to 48 teams in the group stage. And then you have an extra round of teams to the quarterfinal, semi-final, and eventually the final. So I think the pattern remains the same.
Yeah,
You can draw encouragement.
Yeah, I get you. The reason why I said so is because we have more representatives. So if I have more, we have more chances that any of these teams could just cause an upset. That's what I mean by that.
Well, we can take encouragement from the fact that the last time when I say we, I mean Africa, the last time we were at the World Cup in 2022, Morocco went all the way to the
semi-finals. Yeah.
We were knocked out by France. We eventually finished one result to Argentina. We beat the likes of Spain, Portugal, and Belgium in that World Cup run. So we can take encouragement from that. If an African team can get all the way to the semi-final for the first time, who says an African team cannot go all the way to the final? And you take a look at some of these teams, some of these African representatives right now in the World Cup. There are teams that have quality in terms of playing personnel, quality also from the tactical bench. And when it comes to knockout football, anything can happen. I mean, we've seen countries, for instance, Spain, who went to the World Cup in 2010. They not have a very fantastic run at the World Cup. Just about edged most of those games, 1-0, 2-1, slim wins for them, but eventually ended up winning the World Cup. So it could happen with African teams. And yes, like you mentioned, with more representatives, the possibility seems even bigger for Africa to go all the way in the World Cup this time around. But winning the World Cup, we usually have teams that we consider to be favorites. It would not be surprising that for many people across the world, no African teams are not the favorites. But like I said, if Morocco reached the semi-final 4 years ago, then who said an African team cannot reach the final and even win the World Cup?
Of course, who said African team cannot get to the finals and even win the World Cup for the first time? And I'm rooting for my darling Super Eagles. I am sure that we are going to do the first one, first African team to win the. I know they are laughing at me even in the studio that I'm just speaking jargon, but I have the conviction and I'm very sure that the Super Eagles. You said you said what? Yes, now 2030. I'm sure the Super Eagles can win the World Cup 2030. You guys just believe. All right, let's dive into yesterday's game, the first knockout game, which is round of 32. We saw South Africa. Was it that South Africa they had 58% possession, but just one shot on target? I don't know, what is it that they are just too scared to attack them or something? I don't know why we don't have such an amount of possession, and of course you just have just one shot on target.
Well, I think for South Africa, it was not just a thing of probably it was not just a thing of yesterday. I think it's a problem that they reached. First of all, they played to the best of their abilities. I wouldn't exactly say they played very well, because if you have a higher percentage of ball possession, it's not even about how much of the ball you have, it's what you do with the ball when you have the ball. And we could praise them for the defensive structure, the way that they displayed the defensive display against the Czech Republic, against South Korea, and also against Canada yesterday. So one major problem for South Africa has been getting the goals. What they do in the final third has been a major problem for South Africa. We know they have the very big striker now, Foster, in their line squad. It appears that he doesn't do enough in the national team setup, because looking at the way they had the ball yesterday, they weren't so much of a threat to Canada yesterday. The Canadian defense were under pressure, unlike the South African defense, who even at some point Canada had a penalty appeal because of the pressure that they carried up on the South African defense. South Africa were just okay with holding the ball and playing with the ball, and not making any very positive inroads of point. Apart from one of the strikers that I'm saying, South Africa, didn't do much in their position penalty box. And when you play a football game like that, it reduces your chance of getting goals. When you don't score goals, you don't win games. They say defenses win you championships, but you have to score to win a football match, unless you're relying on an own goal. It didn't happen for South Africa yesterday. So I think their major issue is the goal scoring. You take a look at the run to the World Cup, even at the AFCON last year, they're not a side that scores a lot of goals. I think they have a goal scoring problem, and they must fix that goal scoring problem if they want to, become a international team. They've been together for about 5 years with Hugo Blues as their coach. They have developed, they have grown. Last time I was at the, I think two AFCONs ago, they finished third place. Last year, they had a good run, in the AFCON. There is another AFCON next year. If they want to do well, they want to take another step forward as a national team, they need to address their goal scoring problem. I think that's what beat them yesterday against Ghana.
Yeah, talking about even them having been together for 5 years, to just expand your point more, I think most of them who played in the same club, right, in South Africa, and most of them played the Met. So with that, they should be able to gel together and see how they could maybe solve that problem that you mentioned. But Canada missed 4 big chances, was keeping Alphonso Davies at the bench for 75 minutes, too risky for the Canadians.
Well, I wouldn't say too risky because we know that Alfonso Davies has not been fit. He hasn't been fit to play in these games for Canada. That's why he missed all the group stage games. And then coming into a crucial game like the round of 32, the knockout game, you don't want to rush him in and then have to regret that decision if he picks up or not. So you want to ease him into action, and I think that's what the coach did yesterday. And playing in the second half, for the fact that the first time ended at the goal of the it meant that it wasn't a bad decision to put him on the bench to start that game for the bench. Came in the second half around 75 minutes, and we saw that he injected some sort of third into the Canadian attack. He was playing at the wide man up front. He had 1 or 2 take-ons against the South African defense, created a chance for Jonathan David, who could have scored, converted from the near post, just really started coming on. So I think it was a good decision by Canadian coach JP Marsh to bring Alfonso Davies into the game, easing him into action. He's been out for quite a while. And I'm sure that as they progress to the next round, whoever they face, I think he will play more minutes for Canada in the next game, the round of 16 for World Cup. At the end of the day, it proved to be a good decision because they won. Had they lost, we could have been told perhaps we needed the experience.
Yeah, to start it. Okay, well said. But if we're talking about individual player, I think Rowan Williams, the South African goalkeeper, he made 5 massive saves to hold the line. Can we consider him as world class? Despite he lost yesterday, can we consider him as one of the toughest goalkeeper in this tournament?
Yes. Interestingly, this 2026 World Cup is a World Cup where goalkeepers have shown. Brazilian from Cape Verde.
Of Cape Verde, yeah.
That he was man of the match, and we know how the entire world even celebrated that performance. His number on social media went out of the roof. Had from thousands of followers. Now he has over 10 million followers on social media because of such a performance. We can also talk about the goalkeepers for New Zealand. I mean, it seems like every team came to the World Cup with a good goalkeeper. And Rowan Williams, make no mistake, he's one of the best goalkeepers in Africa. It is not up for debate. He's one of the best goalkeepers in Africa for about 3-4 years now. With Mamelodi Sundowns, with the South African national team, he has proven his worth. He's good inside the 90 minutes. If he goes to penalty shootout, he's one goalkeeper you can rely on to play good stuff for you. So I think he's a really good goalkeeper. But to tell him world class would mean I would need for him to perhaps play in a more competitive environment. Even the head coach of the South African national team, Hugo Blues, has talked about the fact that the majority of the players in the South African national team play in the local league. It has its good side and its bad side. The good side is that the players know themselves, they play the same kind of football, there is that cohesion and understanding. The bad side, according to the coach, is that they are not exposed to a higher level of competition. If you're playing for the biggest team in your league, there's little or no competition, But we talked about the possibility of these players, some of these players going to Europe, playing for top clubs in European top league. I think that would upgrade, that would increase their playing standards and improve. When you play in those conditions, perhaps playing, for instance, playing the Champions League, playing the Premier League, it would improve you as a player. So that is what I'm hoping would happen with Rowan Williams. I hope that from the World Cup that we've had, from the track record playing for Mamelodi Sundowns, of course, they are reigning African champions again for the second time in the last 5 years or so. I hope that he makes a move to a top league in Europe. And if he can hold his own, like we saw Vincent and Yamadi very well play for Lille in France, if he can hold his own like that in a top league in Europe, then I think we can have that conversation about Rowan Williams being World Cup. But as far as Africa is concerned, yes, I think he is perhaps the best African goalkeeper. Maybe only second to Yassin Boni, the Moroccan goalkeeper who plays in the South Africa.
Okay, well said. Why did South Africa freeze in the box? They conducted 466 accurate passes, but had only 9 touches inside Canada's box. Where was it? I'm talking about the attack? Was it where is the attack? Like just 9 inside the box after completing 466 accurate passes. But I think there's a problem there.
Yeah, I already mentioned that he had the goal scoring stuff, and I also already mentioned that he had so much ball possession, but couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And if you're not effective, the way football is being played, if you're not effective in your opposition box, then your chances of scoring or getting a goal will really be very, very minimal. You can have a very fortuitous strike once or twice from outside the box that we saw the guy of the winning goal from just at the edge of the penalty area, but they lack that person. Lyle Costa, I don't know if I would squarely put the blame on Lyle Costa because I think he doesn't do enough in the box. He doesn't have that presence in the opposition box. But again, the wide men for the South African team do not give a long penetrating passes into the opposition box for the striker to thrive on. So I think it is something that I have to look at collectively. I don't know whether they're going to get a better striker than Lyle Costa right now because when you talk about South African players playing football, I don't think there are many strikers in South Africa or outside of South Africa that are better than Lyle Costa who can represent the Bafana, right? So I think they maybe need to think about the collective, how they play, their philosophy going forward. Do you get to cross the ball into the box? Do you need to have midfielders who can tread those through balls inside the box and create problems in the position? That is something that is definitely need to work on, like I'm already mentioned. Definitely work on going to make it at the next outcome that they have for next year, or even qualify for the next World Cup and do better than they've already done. And they can hold their heads up high. This is the first time they're making it out of the game at the World Cup in 4-10. But when you have such a performance like you highlighted, just 9 touches inside the opposition box, it means that you have a lot of work to do in your final third.
Indeed, they had a lot of work. As we wrap up, Jay, can Canada survive the round of 16? They face Morocco or Netherlands. Anyone that comes out of that encounter next, do they have the clinical edge to win in Houston? Because that's the venue of their next round of 16 game.
Well, on paper, we'd say low. I mean, the Netherlands are a bigger, quote-unquote, bigger football nation than Canada. Morocco have shown in recent years that they can. I mean, you just mentioned how they beat Spain and Portugal and Belgium on route to reaching the semi-final at the last World Cup. Canada are making it out of the group stage for the first time. I mean, in this World Cup, they scored their first points the way out of the group stage for the first time. So a lot of firsts for Canada. So you wouldn't expect so much of them to go and head-to-head, and take on the Netherlands or Morocco. On paper, it looks like a match that would spell the end of the campaign for Canada. But of course, we've seen instances in previous editions of the World Cup where host nations or co-host nations usually have their best runs at the World Cup when they are hosted. Canada are the host. I forget the fact that they play in Houston. Of course, they also became yesterday the first co-host to play a match and a rematch in the history of the World Cup because they failed to finish top of the group. So it means that from the knockout stages they get to play in the United States. Houston, I'm sure they will have a lot of support in Houston. And this is knockout football. You don't have second chances. One lucky strike for Canada could certainly, if they play a very good defensive game, it could turn out to be a game where fortune could swing in their favor. The opponents get red carded. We saw 2 red cards to South Africa in the opening game. It could happen against the Netherlands or Morocco. And then things just swing in favor of Canada. So, normally from a football standpoint, regular football analysts would say they wouldn't stand a chance against Netherlands or Morocco. But hey, this is football. This is the World Cup. Canadians are believing right now. And there's a lot that belief can do for you in the sport. So I think they will take their chances against whoever comes up in the round.
All right, in as much I want you to keep talking about this, but unfortunately we don't have time anymore. And that's where we wrap up today's edition of the P&B Sports Show. A historic World Cup continues to unfold while South Africa dreams has come to an end. The story of African football is far from over. 9 nations reached the round of 32, and the continent still has teams flying the African flag with hopes of making even more history. My sincere thanks to our guest, Mary J, for joining us virtually from Port Harcourt and sharing his valuable insight. And to you, our viewers, thank you for making the P&B Sports Show part of your football experience. For more details on all our